Hello and welcome to Bully Free LGBT plus Inclusive Schools. My name is Charmaine Jennings and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns as you go through this training today, you can feel free to email me at cjennings@phelanAcademies.org. As we begin, we definitely want to set the tone and set the atmosphere of not a safe space, but a brave space. And there's a big difference. A safe space would assume that the topics and comments and research and information that we will hear during this presentation will somehow make us comfortable, make us safe. Well, that's hard to measure and hard to gauge. So instead, in these types of environments, in these crucial conversations, we encourage a brave space. And I provided an example of a brave space agreement. So go ahead and take about 10 seconds to kind of look over the brave space agreement. You'll notice that some of the comments in our Brave Space Agreement, the sample one that provides, talks about loving ourselves, others, making sure that sometimes there might be some discomfort, but we want to hold each other accountable and especially ourselves for what we say and do. Make sure that the struggle against racism, sexism, ageism, homophobia, transphobia, ableism, classism, misogyny, shame, and other harmful systems. We will also want to handle conflict with love and respect and without calling the police, and to know that our gifts bring valuable to the space. And it also says, I receive the gift that the space offers me. So today we hope that this training and that this session, although a crucial conversation, we hope that it will offer a gift of knowledge, wisdom, curiosity, and the opportunity to decide today if you are interested in moving forward in advocacy or allyship. So I want to start out this session actually with addressing different age groups. So I want to start off with our elementary school scholars and educators. So this is an article that was published by a writer and fellow educator of ours by the name of Paul France. Back in 2019. And the article is through Edutopia, which states supporting LGBTQ students in elementary school. 3 strategies elementary school teachers can use to foster a sense of inclusion for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer students. And not just students, but what happens if a scholar approaches a staff member or one of our colleagues who's a part of the LGBTQ community? How would you respond? So, listen to Paul's story. Mr. Paul, do you have a girlfriend? Little Parker asked me. I don't, I replied succinctly, hoping to avoid the topic altogether. Why? She queried. Because I don't have one, I said. But why? She asked again, smiling up at me. It was clear that I wasn't getting out of this one. This first grader had questions and would demand answers. Well, because I have a boyfriend, I finally exhaled. Oh, that's weird, she said. I understand. Sometimes when things are different, they seem a little weird, I replied. Why do you think it's weird? Well, I just don't like when people make fun of you, Mr. Paul. I feel so bad. In this few minutes, it seemed as though my heart was broken and put back together all at once. We adults often think of sexuality and gender as things that are out of reach for students, especially our youngest ones. We project our discomfort on them, assuming that discussing sexuality, biological sex, or gender is inappropriate for young students. But it's clear from conversations like the one I had with little Parker that children come into our classrooms with a wealth of knowledge. One of our jobs as educators is to welcome students' perspectives in the classroom. But we can also dismantle ways of thinking that reinforce the gender dichotomy and heteronormativity. And we must create safe spaces for children to explore their identities and empathize with those who are different from them. In 2017, the CDC estimated that 8% of high school students identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or queer. Kevin Jennings, who's the founder of the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network, estimates that 1 in 10 educators in the United States identifies as LGBTQ. This data provides the moral imperative for showing pride in the classroom, for finding ways to include the LGBTQ community in our curriculum. The problem is that most teachers don't know where to start, even in spaces where the LGBTQ community is already welcomed and visible. There are 3 ways to create an LGBTQ inclusive classroom, which includes the following. First, include LGBTQ children literature in our classroom libraries. As educators, we should provide both windows and mirrors in our curriculum, ensuring that our book selection represents a diverse array of people and identities. This includes the LGBTQ community. While you may not know it yet, especially if you teach young children, there are students who will identify as LGBTQ at some point in their lives. Our jobs is to provide a safe space or a brave space and role models for them as they age. This also means that we must represent the intersectionality that exists in the LGBTQ community, sharing stories of different genders, ethnicities, race, religions, and classes. And these are just a few of the many books that we can add to our library. One includes Pink is for Boys, and the other is All Are Welcome. Now, these are just 2 of a list of books that we can include into our libraries. I provided these 2 books as read-alouds in your toolkit that you'll receive at the end of this session with us today. The second says we need to rethink our practices that reinforce the gender dichotomy. Well, what does that mean? Well, for example, during our morning meetings, for example, there are some simple ways that we can do it by starting, instead of saying, good morning, boys and girls, we might want to say, good morning, everyone, or good morning, family and friends. And just a simple shift, and that is making our classrooms a little bit more inclusive for our scholars who may struggle or who may already be very clear about their gender identity, expression. And then our third thing we can do is capitalize on the teachable moment. Little Parker took Paul off guard when she asked if the teacher, Mr. Paul, had a girlfriend. And the teacher tried to get out of it, but little Parker insisted that, do you have a girlfriend? And then Parker, once the teacher, Mr. Paul, decided to reveal that no, he had a boyfriend, Parker was able to share how she empathized with the fact that it always made her feel bad that people would pick on the teacher or talk about the teacher. So that also made the teacher aware that Parker has been hearing things about her teacher that bothered her. And so now the teacher can at least try to address her concerns and her heavy heart. So we always want to capitalize on the teachable moments, because even though we may not hear it or see it, definitely our scholars are knowledgeable and they bring that wealth of knowledge in the classroom. So now, what does it mean to be an advocate? Well, according to Merriam-Webster's dictionary, an advocate is one who pleads the cause of another, one who defends or maintains a cause or proposal, one who supports or promises the interest of a cause or a group. According to our organization, glsen.org, it says, advocacy and how do we address questions and pushback. Inviting families into conversations and clear communication around the direction of the school is a valuable experience when introducing LGBTQ visibility. LGBTQ integration in elementary school should be introduced by administrators or school leaders and communicated to staff members during professional development before the start of a new school year, and to families at the start of the year on curriculum or back to school nights. So during our curriculum nights or our back to school nights are a great time to talk about anything that might be in our classroom. It gives the parents an opportunity to look through curriculum ideas and to see and hear for themselves what the messaging is. Front loading with the schools is responsibility to provide a safe and supportive learning environment for all students, along with a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, can be a strong start to the school year and a time to address any misconceptions or apprehensions. We encourage school leaders to invite families into the school to have these conversations with coffee hours, panel events, or movie screenings. And we can learn more about gender inclusive language with our educator resources and introduce gender neutral pronouns using our pronoun lessons, bring pronoun visibility into self-portraits, and occasionally at our morning meetings. Another way that we can do it is we can connect with specialty educators to share what the students are learning and or reinforcement. And then we have some resources that are provided for us by this fabulous organization, GLSEN, which are called Changing the Game with PE Teachers and Coaches, because we know that our PE classes in elementary schools are they're gender specific. They're great resources and things for us to do to at least start the advocacy process in our schools. But our leaders and our administrators definitely lead the charge, help to guide how we communicate it to families and how our process will work. So, what is an ally? Because again, we will talk about advocacy, and we will talk about what it means to be an ally or allyship. Well, according to Forbes, we know Forbes is a major organization that provides great information and resources for us. What is an ally? Well, according to Forbes, it says allyship is a lifelong process of building relationships based on trust, consistency, and accountability with marginalized individuals and or groups of people. Allyship is not self-defined. Wait a minute. That means I can't call myself an ally. At some point, in order for me to be an ally, a person from a marginalized group need to see me as one. They need to involve me as one, and they need to definitely identify me as their ally. I don't get to just say that I'm an ally, right? Okay, so according to Forbes, we cannot self-define ourselves as an ally. That happens by really looking around to see who considers us an ally, okay? It says working efforts must be recognized by those you are seeking to ally with. Allyship is an opportunity to grow and learn about ourselves whilst building confidence in others. So while we're building confidence in others, we're also learning and growing as ourselves. That's a part of being an ally, okay? And in addition to that, it says an ally is any person who actively promotes and aspires to advance the culture of inclusion through intentional, positive, and conscientious efforts that people as a whole. So, Forbes gave us a lot to think about, okay? I thought I could be just an ally just because I have a good heart, and in my mind, I'm a very supportive person. Well, according to Forbes, no. You need to really ask yourself or ask the marginalized group if they consider you to be an ally based on how they experience you and in your work within that community. And on your screen, you will see it says your ally is someone who, this is through the lens of those marginalized groups. Typically, allyship looks, feels, and sounds like the following. It's a person who's non-judgmental, a person that listens without interrupting, listens with an open mind, listens with genuine curiosity, listens and makes you feel comfortable, listens and keeps your secrets safe, listens so you can share without fear, and listens and allows you to be 100% you. That's a lot. A lot to think about. So the word allyship is big. We see what it means to be an advocate, and we see what it means to be an ally. Now let's dig deeper. Now, what can I do as an elementary school teacher? Like, okay, what can I do to take this back to my classroom, or at least to just educate myself? Because again, we want to look to our administrators on our sites as to how we can move this work forward. Well, this organization, fabulous organization that I recently discovered, all right, in this search to provide this session for us today, they have a toolkit. I love toolkits because it gives each of us an opportunity to see what it looks, feels, and sounds like in action. So this toolkit, I mean, it has everything we can think about. First of all, it's called Ready, Set, Respect. It was developed in partnership with the National Association of Elementary School Principals, so the NAESP, an organization that serves elementary and middle school principals in the United States, Canada, and overseas, and the National Association for the Education of Young Children, so NAEYC, right? NAEYC. The world's largest organization working on behalf of young children. So, I mean, these are two of our national organizations that, I mean, they research, they study in our field of education. They put this toolkit together. And inclusive in this toolkit includes, in part 1, name calling, bullying, and bias. So they give us strategies and tips on what we specifically can do in those if when those events occur, because bullying does start in elementary school. And elementary school teachers, we have to start in elementary school, because by middle school we're going to dive into some data, and I'm telling you, the data shows that in middle school it's at alarming rates. So they didn't just go to middle school and it just happened. It happened with hormonal changes and chemical influxes. It didn't just happen. No, I'm sure it started sometime in 5th grade or 4th grade when things were changing then. Some other things that are in this toolkit, guess what? They break it down by grade. So we have our K through 2nd grade appropriate lesson plans and resources and strategies on how to have crucial conversations, as well as they separate it with our intermediate grade levels, 3rd through 5th grade. So I love that. And they even have other ideas that talk about family diversity and what happens when a scholar at home has 2 dads, or when those 2 dads show up to our family engagement night and there's some whispers from the other scholars, or snickers or laughter. Like, how do we address those things as a school so everyone feels safe and included? So it has a lot of resources. I'm telling you, these organizations, they thought of everything. So take a look at that, and that is also included in your toolkit. So now we're going to dig deep into some of this data. What is happening across our 50 states in the United States regarding this topic, having a bully-free LBGT plus inclusive school? Well, our Do Not activity, I'm going to give you about 10 seconds to think this through. What would you think, say, or do if a scholar or even a parent came to you and said, my school's policy on bullying and harassment is extremely vague and non-specific? The policy states that the school will not stand for bullying or harassment. But why does it not include any specific measures that will be taken to prevent and or solve any problems? It also doesn't include protections for any minorities, including religious, ethnic, and LGBTQ students. So, this was actually a statement that was reoccurring that scholars and parents were bringing to schools all across the United States. They were really questioning our policies. So, I'm going to give you 10 seconds. Do you know what your school's bully and harassment policy is? Is it thorough? Does it include specific measures on what it looks, feels, and sounds like? How do we do an investigation? Do you know what to do as an educator? Do you know what your responsibility is and the protocol? Do you know when to get parents involved? Do you know what are the consequences or what are the interventions that we provide, not only the victim, but the one being accused of bullying? So these are all questions that we have to ask ourselves. And we get great training at the beginning of the school year, but sometimes it's helpful for us to have a reminder or refresher by January when we're mid-year, and a lot of times those behaviors start to arise. Okay, I've given you a lot to think about. So it's been more than 10 seconds, but a lot to think about. If you don't know your school's policy, then I challenge you to actually look up your school's bully, harassment, and intimidation policy. It might be called a safe school policy, and make sure that you're aware of what your responsibility is and or the processes of how you can support a scholar who might be experiencing that. Because we're going to find out what happens when we do nothing, or what happens when we think we've made an effective intervention, and how our scholars experience that. Okay, so this chart is from our organization, GLSEN, and I've already kind of broken down what that means. Well, this chart says here, the prevalence of school and district anti-bullying / harassment policies over time. So we can see in 2003, there were about 50% of our schools across all 50 states in the United States that actually have an anti-bullying or harassment policy. Okay, so half of our schools by 2003 had a policy. That was great progress, right? And then it increased to about 70% in 2005. So I mean, it went up, right? But then it dropped down back in 2007. And then it went back up in 2011. And so that means we just had a policy. But then I want you to take a look at what you noticed about our graph here from 2005 to 2019. 2019. So think about that. At the point of 2019, there's still only maybe 10 to 15% of our schools in all 50 states in these United States that has a comprehensive policy on anti-bullying and harassment, which means comprehensive means it tells us what it looks like, feels like, and sounds like. As an administrator, I know my role. I know how to conduct an investigation. As a teacher, I know my role. I know how to report it. I know when to get the parents involved. We know how to make sure we're educating our scholars on what bullying is. We know what are the interventions. Our social services team, they know how to provide counseling for the victim and for the scholar if the scholar is found to have been a bully. So comprehensive means everyone knows their role. We know the policies, we know the procedures, and we know what it is what our plan of action is, and how to involve the parents and families of that scholar. So a lot to think about. But right now, guess what? We're still only at 10% out of 50 of our states. We have a lot of work to do. So our session today, our goal and our objective is, how can educators become allies or advocates for LGBTQ plus scholars who are being bullied? Let's explore how to create an inclusive school environment by unpacking the LGBTQ plus acronym. So we're going to unpack the acronym, make sure we know what that means, right? The history, a little bit of the history, because in order to be an advocate or an ally, you first definitely need to be aware of some of the heroes within the community and some common biases and how advocacy and allyship should look, feel, and sound like. So, what does it mean to be bullied? Well, according to the definition of one of our schools in our network here, it says, bullying means any written or verbal expression or physical act or gesture or pattern thereof that is intended to cause distress upon one or more students in the school, on school grounds, in school vehicles, or at school activities or other sanctioned events. It is pretty thorough, okay? This includes cyberbullying, okay, online. And cyberbullying has become a big challenge for schools to not only monitor, but to also determine where our jurisdiction lies. But this is our definition, our sample definition of bullying. And I took this actually out of our parent-teacher handbook, out of one of our schools in our network. So what does the LGBTQ plus acronym mean? All right, let's break it down to make sure that we have common language. So LGBTQIA, according to outrightinternational.org, is, and it means lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and or questioning, intersex, and asexual and or ally. So we have Q's, we have two Q's, queer, questioning, and then we have A, which is asexual or ally. So this website and this organization really provides some great definitions for us to get clarity, but it is important for us to know that the LGBTQ acronym is evolving. There are new terms that appear, and some terms that are forgotten or unused are sometimes now used that were once derogatory. In moving towards inclusivity, the older, shorter acronym LGBT has been expanded, and we see that. It says, moreover, they mean different things to different people. And so that's important to know. The acronym doesn't always mean the same thing to everyone within the community. So again, as potential ally or advocate, we want to make sure that we're listening more than we're speaking and allowing ourselves to learn. Okay, so what is the civil rights history of the LGBTQ plus community in the United States? This is a valuable piece of history for us to know and learn, whether you have a scholar or not. It's just important because it's a part of U.S. history. So let's explore together as we watch a short video about the civil rights history of the LGBTQ plus community.
Back in 1969, as a turbulent decade was winding down, the Stonewall Inn was a popular gathering place for New York City's LGBT community. At the time, being gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender was considered obscene, illegal, even a mental illness. One night, police raided the bar and started arresting folks. Raids like these were nothing new, but this time the patrons had had enough, so they stood up and spoke out. The riots became protests. The protests became a movement. The movement ultimately became an integral part of America. So this week, I'm designating the Stonewall National Monument as the newest addition to America's national park system. Stonewall will be our first national monument to tell the story of the struggle for LGBT rights. I believe our national park should reflect the full story of our country, the richness and diversity and uniquely American spirit that has always defined us, that we are stronger together, that out of many, we are one.
Having been at Stonewall, being back here, I think I have a kind of a survivor's guilt, I could call it, because like on the Stonewall picture of Fred McDowell, I'm probably the only one still alive. Most of them never lived to get to be like 24 or 25 years old. Back then, I didn't think about it being difficult. You just had to get through it. Most gay people back then, if they had any kind of a job, they were scared to death of even being found out to be gay. We had nothing, so we had nothing to lose. You know, it's like the Bob Dylan song where he says, when you ain't got nothing, you got nothing to lose.
I remember the late 1960s. Gay people were victims on a culture that had no respect, no tolerance.
We were being brutalized, we were being murdered, we were being ostracized in a sense. Stonewall was a safe haven for LGBT people.
The Stonewall riots in 1969, I think, obviously it was a very pivotal point in our history. It was when we all stood up and a trans woman of color said enough is enough, and it started a movement. And it started a movement that said, we're not less than you, we are your equals. When you think about the riots, you think about unity. And that unity is something that we've never lost.
Today, we have gay and lesbian elected officials. We see cultural changes in television and movies. President Obama has been the most proactive president for LGBT people in America. There is no second place.
President Obama, I mean, in his second term inauguration speech, actually mentioned Stonewall. That never happened before. Stonewall is now historically given like a definitive place through a president of the United States.
We, the people, declare today that the most evident of truths, that all of us are created equal, is the star that guides us still. Just as it guided our forebears through Seneca Falls and Selma and Stonewall, just as it guided all those men and women, sung and unsung, who left footprints along this great mall, to hear a preacher say that we cannot walk alone, to hear a king proclaim that our individual freedom is inextricably bound to the freedom of every soul on earth.
Okay, and that was just a brief overview of what the Stonewall Inn is and where the civil rights movement, I won't say it began, but it definitely, that moment in our history really started a lot of conversations and movement to bring awareness to a lot of the injustices that were occurring for individuals within the LGBTQ community. And one of those individuals who is very respected is Marsha P. Johnson. And she was an activist, self-identified drag queen, performer, and survivor. She was a prominent figure in the Stonewall Uprising in 1969. She went by Black Marsha before settling on Marsha P. Johnson. The P stood for pay it no mind, which is what Marsha would say in response to questions about her gender. Marsha P. Johnson, as pictured, you can see it on the left, and Sylvia Rivera, they formed Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, an organization called STAR, in 1970 to address issues faced by street people, trans people in prison, poor people, homeless youth, and other marginalized groups who were not being adequately supported or represented by the other LGBTQ organizations. So a lot of homelessness took place when our youth were to come out or start to express a gender that wasn't traditional. So if I'm a male and I wanted to wear that skirt or whatever, I might be at risk of my parents kicking me out of my house, which was a normal occurrence. So homelessness was big for students to come out or to share their feelings or to express themselves in any other way that didn't go along with the social norms. So these were individuals that might be role models and heroes, especially to our scholars in middle school and in high school. So something for us to be aware of if in fact you find yourself needing to advocate for a scholar, or if a scholar brings this person's name up and during Black History Month or during a people fair, someone that they admire. So just something to think about and to be aware of and knowledgeable about. And it says, what are some common 6th through 12th grade LGBTQ plus experiences with biases at school? We're going to explore more what the data looks like across our nation. Again, GLSEN, which stands for Gay, Lesbian, Straight Educator Network, is the leading national education organization that focuses on ensuring safe schools for all students. Established in 1990, GLSEN envisions a world in which every child learns to respect and accept all people, regardless of their sexual orientation or gender, identity, and expression. All right, so now let's go ahead and unpack what the data says. This is the report. This is the 2019 report, which says students who felt unsafe at school because of actual or perceived personal characteristics include the following. Go ahead and look at this chart and notice what are the highest percentages of scholars when they feel unsafe. Well, and I will give a disclaimer that this report included 16,000 youth across all 50 states Their ages range from 13 to 19. And these were scholars that had to be registered in school at the time when they took the survey. And the survey was distributed through social media engines to keep it safe and anonymous for scholars. So Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, a lot of those were the platforms in which, and you will have, again, a link to this report for you to look at what things you want to consider when looking at this data. But this represents 16,000 youth between the ages of 13 and 19, I believe. Okay, so something that we can look at here, we'll notice that scholars didn't feel safe. 59%, 42%, and 39% make the highest percentages here. And that includes scholars that consider themselves a part of the community based on their sexual orientation. They didn't feel safe at school. Their gender expression, they didn't feel safe at school. And their body size or weight. So again, something for us as educators to think about. And then here it says feeling unsafe in school because of citizenship amongst foreign-born LGBTQ. So this is someone at the intersection. One of my identities is that I'm a part of this LGBTQ community, but another identity is I'm a non-citizen. So in being a non-citizen, let's look at what the data shows us here. Well, if we take a look here, the undocumented scholars, that rose between 2017 and 2019. We went from 40% to almost 65% of those scholars didn't feel safe at school. So that tells us a lot about our social climate and how, again, our scholars need teachers and educators that are going to make sure that we're following the law, first of all, and not disclosing things that we're not legally permitted to disclose, but making sure that they feel safe with the adults in the building. So that says a lot. And then in this chart here, it says percentages of LGBTQ students who avoided spaces at school because they felt unsafe or uncomfortable. So let's look at some of these areas. Amongst the top at 45% through 40%, these are the danger zones for our scholars: bathrooms. So I know I would have an issue with scholars coming in my class and then asking, less than 2 minutes, can I go to the bathroom? And I'm like, why didn't you go to the bathroom during the change of classes? Well, looking at this data, 45% of the 16,000 scholars that are within this community do not feel safe in bathrooms. So it's probably normal that if I don't feel safe going to the bathroom, am I going to go to the bathroom during the change of class when most people are in there and there's no adult supervision in middle school or high school inside the bathroom? No, I'm probably going to go to class. I'm going to ask my teacher or a teacher that I trust and feel safe with, and then I'm going to risk going to the restroom during class so that at least there's less people in the bathroom so I can feel safer. Same thing with locker rooms and PE education, gym classrooms, and the locker rooms. So we have to be very careful because those are environments that tend to only have a gender-specific bathroom. One for males, one for females, and no family bathroom. So something for us to think about. And then the last thing I want us to see is, and we will be looking at some data. So we're looking at this report. It says frequency of hearing anti-LGBTQ remarks at school. So we have high percentages when we look at frequently, or they often hear these types of things. So we're at like 70% frequently or often hearing things like "that's so gay" or "no homo," which came from a piece of legislature that was really in the works in one of our Western states. That was the name of it, the no homo legislation. So we're not surprised that we're hearing these things if these are things that are being talked about in our political arenas and in our social platforms. Other homophobic remarks include fag or dyke. That is on the rise, as we notice. Remarks about gender expression, and then remarks about transgender people. So hearing words like tranny or he, she's, we have to get this out of our vocabulary. And especially as adults in the building, we want to make sure we're modeling and we're stopping and interrupting any of that type of language. I know as a former high school teacher, I would hear that a lot. Oh, man, that's so gay, or you're so gay. And I used to always interrupt by saying, oh, gay means happy. So I'm gay, you're smiling, oh, she's gay. And my scholars would kind of look at me like, Senora Jennings, you know that is not what we're talking about. And I'm like, okay, well, let's tell me what you're talking about. What do you mean? I'm not understanding. And then they would try to explain it. And I'm like, well, what you mean and what you intend to mean is offensive to many people, and it's harmful. And they're like, oh, well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to respect. Because again, sometimes our scholars, they've become so it's become a norm to say certain things that they may not know. They may have become desensitized to it because maybe it doesn't impact their group. Maybe they're not a part of that marginalized group, right? So it is our responsibility to interrupt the behavior. We interrupt it. We ask them to clarify, well, what do you mean by that? And then we educate them. We talk to them about why those comments and those remarks can exclude people. It's offensive to some people. Some people have lost their lives because they identify as gay or whatever, whatever that expression is, or they are verbalizing or traumatizing a person who has experienced maybe a loved one who died because of their affiliations or just because of who they are in association with that slur. So it can be re-traumatizing for others to hear those words. So we have to educate our scholars and not allowing those things to slide. All right, so now I want you to stop and reflect. Look at this chart. And what do you notice and what do you wonder? You have 10 seconds. Okay, this is our first chart, so I gave you a little more than 10 seconds. So, and that 10 seconds and our timer goes by really quick. All right, so now, based on what you notice or even what you wonder about this chart and about this piece of data that we have, what do you think the cause is and what do you think the effect is? So this chart here, it provides kind of a breakdown of what I just talked about. We hear that so gay on here, other homophobic remarks, negative remarks and gender expression, the no homo remarks, or negative remarks about transgender people. Well, one thing that I noticed is between 2017 and 2019, a lot of things are on the decline, which to me is good. But there is one area that went up from 2017 to 2019, and that's the expression no homo. That went up. Saying that's so gay, that also went up. That increased between 2017 and 2019, right? And then another thing I noticed is that the negative remarks about transgender people, they were on the rise from 2013 all the way from 2017. And now that a lot more people are speaking out on behalf and advocating for a transgender community, it has decreased some, okay? But there's still a lot of work to be done. And again, what is the cause and the effect? We have to look at our social climate, look at the social climate between 2017 and 2019. Why are scholars feeling this way? And this is based on the words and the experiences of our scholars. And let's look at this one. And so I kind of circled here what I noticed and what I wondered here. But I do wonder for the ones that went down, were there interventions? Maybe were these scholars who felt safer because maybe they're in a different school environment? So I do kind of wonder what, for the ones that went down, what were those things that made the difference in it going down? Maybe there are more commercials on TV, more awareness in our society. All right, let's look at this chart. It says anti-LGBT language by school staff over time. So this is language and things that scholars are hearing from staff at school. What do you notice? What do you wonder? What do you think the cause is and the effect? Three, 2, and 1. Okay, what do you notice? All right, stop and reflect. Okay. So I was kind of able to I'm taking a look at 2015 to 2017. So I'm noticing there was an increase of negative remarks about gender expression during that time. But I noticed that it dropped from 2017 to 2019. So that's good. Something's working, something's different, but it's still high. I mean, it's still at 70%. So not to discount, it dropped a little bit, but that's still too high. And we still have to do something about that. And then the homophobic remarks, over time, we have definitely dropped, when we look throughout the years, and we did have a decrease as well. Both of them decreased, but when we look at it, it's still very high. We're still at about 60, maybe 59%. So that's still high. And what are the causes? What are the effects? How much influence do we have as adults, parents, community members, friends, peers? Something for us to think about. All right. So in number 3, look at this chart. I'm going to give you 10 seconds to look at this. Stop and reflect. What do you notice? What do you wonder? Okay. Over the course between 2001 and 2019, I mean, we definitely see an increase of staff. Oh, this says availability of supportive school staff over time. Okay. So, this makes me feel better. So in 2001, we might have been at 50%. So 50% of schools across America, the scholars said that they felt like they had supportive staff. But as of 2019, man, we're almost at, 90%. 90% of our scholars said that they can identify at least one supportive teacher or staff member at school. That's amazing. At least one, right? But where are we when it comes to many? We've gone from 40% of those of our scholars out of the 16,000. Well, back in 2013, I'm not sure how many people took the survey, but we went from 40% saying that they had many supportive teachers, which meant 6 or more teachers at their school were supportive of them, and now we're just above that. We're probably about at 70. All right, 70%. So that's a good thing. 70% of the scholars as of 2019 said that they feel like they have multiple supportive teachers and staff members at school. What is the cause? What is the effect? Maybe our educators feel, maybe we have educators that have a statement of allyship, or they have a statement of advocacy to make their classes more inclusive, or to even share that they're a part of the community themselves, and that they feel safe at work. So to be able to share that they are a part of the community themselves. There could be a lot of causes and things like that, but definitely good to know that we're on the increase every year with that. And lastly, we have this one. Intervention regarding negative remarks and gender expression over time. So what are we doing interventions? And if so, are they working? So this chart kind of can identify a little bit. Sorry. All right. So what was my notice and my wonder? I kind of looked at 2015 to 2019. So go ahead and take 10 seconds to look at that. What do you notice? Okay, so the light line there it says intervention by school staff. Then the brown line, it says intervention by other students. So students are really, they're really doing the interventions, and they're really starting to become a community amongst themselves. And that is great, because a lot of times as adults, we're not always around to hear things. So when we empower our scholars to make the interventions, to know how to respond when someone is making a negative comment, and how they can be that positive light and support, then that's great. So we noticed that there was an increase between 2015 and 2017, but we've noticed a slight decline, not only with scholars, but also with our staff, a slight decline. But we noticed a decline with students. We've gone back to the percentages where they were in 2015. So that's not good. So we want to make sure that we're arming our scholars with tools and how to address things as well. All right. So here's a statement. It says, I got rocks thrown at me and was beaten by kids at my school. I never told anyone about this, not a parent, school, staff member, nor a peer. So why would a scholar allow something like this to happen to them, but they never tell anyone? What could be the potential cause of that? Something to think about. These types of things happen every day, where scholars are experiencing discomfort at school, but they don't say anything. And so we have to ask ourselves why. Well, according to this report as well, first of all, there's a lot of things that happen in our social climates that prevent scholars from feeling like they're protected. The 14th Amendment talks about who has the right to protections in this country. And it's supposed to be all. As a citizen, whether you're a citizen, non-citizen, there's certain privileges that are given, but there is supposed to be protection under the law via your state as well as national protections as well. And so if scholars don't feel that way in our schools, then we definitely want to reflect, okay, what can we be doing better? Well, just so you know, according to the research in this report, the GLSEN report, it says reasons LGBTQ students do not always report incidences of harassment or assault to school staff. Well, these are some of our numbers. Doubted that effective interventions would occur. So under that category, we have 72.7% said that they didn't think staff would do anything about it. They just didn't think we would respond at all. And then we have 65.8% says they didn't think that the school staff's handling of the situation would be effective. So they didn't think that what we would do would really shift and pretty much help to revise the behavior. And then we have feared making the situation worse. Under this category, okay, 63% of our scholars, especially by the time middle school and high school hits, they don't want to be called a snitch or a tattletale. That culture is definitely frowned upon. And then they have to deal with retaliation, violence, and all of that kind of thing. And then it says some of them just didn't want to be outed. Like, I'm not ready to share that I'm a part of this community yet, even though others are treating me, and I believe are treating me this way because they believe I identify with this community. And then the rest is concerns about approaching school staff. So some of them were too embarrassed or ashamed to report it. Some of them feared being blamed or getting in trouble for the harassment. So I think as a victim, I'm going to be blamed, and I'm going to be told it's my fault. So these percentages are just alarming and something for us to think about. And one of our most marginalized groups within this community, it says all LGBTQ students of color experience similar levels of victimization based on race/ethnicity, although Black students were more likely to feel unsafe about their race and ethnicity than AAPI, which are Asian American. And then we have Latinx, Native and Indigenous, multiracial, and white students. Native and Indigenous LGBTQ students were generally more likely than other racial ethnic groups to experience anti-LGBTQ victimization and discrimination. And then we look, the information is just, It's a lot. It's a lot to think about. And lastly, I know I'm giving you a lot of data, but I definitely want us to look at this report because it's real and it's happening. And if we don't look at what we're doing in elementary school, from the transition to middle school and high school, then we're going to find ourselves having more and more challenges. And look at this. It says LGBTQ students in middle school had more hostile school experiences and less access to LGBTQ related school supports than LGBTQ students in high school. So the supports are fewer in middle school, but the hostility and victimization is a lot higher. Middle school teachers, we have to make sure if our administrators are saying stand outside in the hallways, they need us monitoring the hallways. They need us monitoring those blind spots in our school areas where these incidences are happening. When our behavioral, our deans and things, when they're looking at our data about incidences at school, we need to make sure we're looking at those data reports and we're listening to our deans and our behavioral administrators who are telling us we're noticing high frequency of behaviors and trends that are happening in this hot zone. We need to make sure that we're watching. It's our job, not just a dean's job, they're one person. But teachers, when we see it, we have to say something. When we see it, we have to interrupt the behavior. All right. And most importantly, scholars really, whether they go to a public school, a charter school, private school, they found that there are a lot that they're experiencing, having the same hostile school climate experiences. The difference is in our private schools and charter schools, they tend to have more access to school supports and than students in public school. But students in public schools are more likely to have a straight alliance and most likely to have LGBTQ inclusive school library resources, so books and resources for them. So something for us to think about as well. So now we're at a place where I really want to ask you, what does advocacy or allyship look, feel, and sound like for you? Are you an ally to a student? Not because you self-define yourself as an ally, but is there a student that tends to seek you out, that has latched on to you, they really feel safe around you, you're a great listener, and they just keep coming back because they feel comfortable in your space? Then you are an ally because you've been designated one. It's like we don't get to choose whether we want to be a role model or one. That really is determined by others. And then what will you advocate for? And so these are some of the things I want you to think about. And then really just self-reflect. I think, I feel, I want to try, or I will commit to. What will you commit to today? And before you make that commitment, let's be honest. What might interrupt your role as an advocate and or ally for a student that fits in to this community? Because even our elementary school students, they may not say I'm LGBTQ, but any scholar who has experienced bullying because they don't fit in with society's traditional gender roles, norms, expressions, or identity. Will your spirituality or religion interrupt your ability to advocate for a scholar? Will you look the other way because it's like, oh, I don't agree with their lifestyle, I don't agree with their choices? Will we be one of those educators that we saw in the report that says, you need to change your behavior, and maybe this victimization won't happen to you? We don't want to be that person that blames the victim for things that are occurring to them. Instead, we want to make sure that our community is more inclusive and that your free will choices, are we limiting their choices as well? So some things to think about. So what are some examples and non-examples of how we can be an advocate and an ally? Well, just some of the things that were already mentioned earlier. For middle school and high school especially, it says student clubs that address issues for LGBTQ students. So GSA is an organization that many of our high schools have, and if we don't have it, maybe there's an adult, you yourself might be interested in becoming that club leader or that sponsor. It's a school personnel who are supportive of LGBTQ students. So maybe we want to have a statement or something that lets scholars know that I am in support of making sure that you can go to school in a safe and caring environment? Can you support that you are an educator advocate, that every child deserves to go to school in a safe environment, and you will uphold our safe school policy for anti-harassment, anti-intimidation, and anti-bullying? LGBTQ inclusive curriculum materials. Would you use, if you're an elementary school teacher or a middle school or high school teacher, are you willing to have some books or stories that are inclusive of maybe members of the community who may be authors, or certain stories? It doesn't have to be topics, but will you at least include an author that's a part of that community? So some of the things that we can do include the history and key leaders, civil rights contributors, what progress has been made in the community for their civil rights, and who are their role models. Other things include inclusive, supportive school policy. So just going back, look at your safe school policy and see, do we need to add some specific or more explicit or clear vocabulary there? Our social services team, are you aware? Maybe they have a support group. Maybe are we aware that they offer counseling, or that they know counseling organizations or services that can support a scholar and their family? Maybe one of our students are experiencing homelessness because their family kicked them out. Is there a safe space where, if I don't identify as female or male, is there a restroom that I can use, maybe near the nurse's station or something like that? Use the chosen pronouns, or ask scholars how they want to be addressed. Simple as that. How do you want to be addressed? Create family engagement opportunities and a list of supportive resources and organizations. So I've included very supportive organizations in our toolkit that you can further explore, that are specific to elementary, middle school, and high school. Some non-examples include staff telling the reporting student to change their behavior. If someone's being bullied, we don't want to be that person that tells them, well, it's your fault, because that's ultimately what we're doing if we're telling them to change their behavior. Staff discipline, and these are out of the mouths of the scholars from the report. All right, it says the staff disciplined the student who reported the incident. So really disciplining the person who reported the incident. I'm being bullied and now I'm getting suspended. Not good. Staff did nothing to address the incident and or told the reporting student to ignore the harassment. So the teacher didn't do anything, and instead, if I reported it, you tell me just ignore it. It'll stop. The staff contacted the reporting student's parents. Oh my gosh, you told my parents, and my parents don't even know that, I'm gay. So now you outed me to my parents. The staff referred the incident to another staff member. So maybe you passed it off to someone else. Definitely want to talk to the scholar about that and make sure that, again, it might be something that is over your head as a teacher, but you definitely want to make sure that you don't just pass it off without holding the other adult accountable, or asking the adult, hey, what's the follow-up? Or what should I do now in my role? The staff used a peer mediation / conflict resolution approach, and ... It didn't work. So again, we just have to make sure that whatever we do, that scholars feel like they have closure, and that they feel, ask them how we're doing. Ask them about our customer service. Because if we just follow a protocol and the policy, but the person still is not settled that they're safe in our school environment, then we definitely have more work to do. And it says the staff separated the perpetrator and reporting student. So just trying to keep them separate all school day. That's kind of hard to do. All right. But these are some things that occurred. But again, from the mouths of our students in this report, they felt like they didn't work. And then the last one was doing nothing. The worst thing we can do is do nothing. So now in our toolkit, we will find the following resources. So we have some resources that we can use to educate ourselves. There's a guide for creating an LGBT inclusive school climate. There's a 2019 National School Climate Survey. There's the definition of LGBTQ. There's a safe school policy. So I included one of our schools in our network that has a very explicit explanation on what we're to do for anti-harassment, bullying, and intimidation. And so on pages 26 through 34, you can kind of read what that is. And then it says being there for non-binary youth. There's an article there. The problem with pronouns, something that we can read, because again, some of our scholars don't want to be addressed with he, she, him, her, but they go by they, them. And so that took some adjustment for me. And to use the they, them pronoun instead of using their names 50 times in a conversation, or to be able to ask someone, a fellow colleague, what are your preferred pronouns? Just being brave enough to ask the question. And 50 years of pride, and we have LGBTQ awareness calendars. Ooh, it's important to know, why are you doing this or doing that? Well, there's an awareness calendar that you might want to familiarize yourself with. Here's a lesson plan that you can use for elementary, middle, or high. Again, consult with your administrator for that. And then we have some other elementary school resources that are specific to elementary, and some read alouds of those books. And then we have some film and media just for you about Stonewall and other popular topics that evolved this. So as we close today, again, hopefully you had time to reflect. Hopefully you learned something that you didn't learn before. As I'm learning, I always love to share with you, so we learn together. And yes, just let us know what other topics or things that you're interested in exploring more and even digging deeper into. And we'll be sure to do it. My name is Charmaine Jennings. My email address is cjennings@phelanAcademies.org. Thank you for being here with us today as we explored our bully-free LGBT plus inclusive schools.